And welcome to An Hour with the Candidates, also known as Candidates Corner, a project of the Libertarian National Committee, Joe Bishop Hensman, Chairman. My name is Pat Ford. I am your host for this evening activities. I'm a proud chair of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island. As always, a special evening tonight. Joining us, former candidate for New York 52, the Big 52, State Senate candidate, Thomas Quiter. And we've also got one of America's Libertarian mayors, Mayor Cassaundra Fryman of Plymouth, Ohio. And we're going to talk about Libertarianism in action. Tonight is an opportunity to discuss past elections, what we've learned, what we're going to attempt to do in the upcoming races, and also an opportunity to chat about, again, what it's like to be a Libertarian steward. Again, we've abolished the term govern, if you will. We've abolished authority names. I mean, listen, if other parts of the political spectrums can eliminate words, we can too, right? We're libertarians. We can do what we want. So when we use the word steward, what we mean is libertarian leadership in action as it's displayed before communities for whom a libertarian may be something completely foreign to them. They may not be really aware of our statement of principles as we are. They may not really understand our philosophy. What they know is on a day-to-day basis, there's an individual acting as a mayor, a town council person, a board chair. It could be a water board, a sewer board. It could be a board of education. And they call themselves libertarian. What does that mean to that community? We're blessed to have great candidates like we have on tonight and great elected officials, because both of these individuals have done an astonishing job of bringing to the American public on a very local basis our statement of principles and our philosophies in action. And what we're going to try to do is learn from them and take these, if you will, these opportunities to learn, as we've done over the past several weeks post-election, learn from them, grow from them, extrapolate them, and bring them, well, to the rest of America. It may seem to many that our elections are a long way away. Well, first of all, we've got some special elections coming up. We had John Phillips on just a few weeks ago. He's running for town council, not in a interestingly scheduled election. But there will be elections this year. There are a handful of communities around the country that go on the odd year. We've got to prepare for them and find out ways that the libertarian community at large, the national libertarians, both large L and small, can help them in their efforts. And of course, this is the time when we start contemplating, what do we do in 2022? And if there's a consistent message from all of the folks who ran such amazing campaigns in 2020, it's the notion that getting out early, planning early, fundraising early, reaching out and creating that key volunteer infrastructure early is a huge component of either, well, frankly, doing well. In many cases, candidates ran as a libertarian for the first time in that community's history in 2020. Or in those cases where folks have been able to build up that infrastructure, build up that volunteer experience, build up a reputation in the community. Getting off to an early start is critically important in winning those elections. So let's get with the candidates. Let's get with the folks who made 2020 very special. Joining us again for the second time, he's officially an alumni and a repeat offender. He was a candidate for the state senate for the big New York 52. I think we all know him as that libertarian, and I'm going to use the word folk hero because that's not something I impart lightly, but truly a folk hero to libertarians everywhere because of his intelligence, his wit, and an incredible work ethic that, quite frankly, transcends what your more stereotypical candidate, if you will, could do. Probably one of the hardest fought campaigns in this country, surrounded by campaigns that were of amazing vigor. Thomas Quiter, welcome back to An Hour with the Candidates Corner.
Thank you for having me. How are you doing today?
I am the American dream come true. I am Yeah. Yeah.
So you got that stimulus check.
No, not yet, not yet. I think the government has other plans for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing time to be a libertarian in places like New York and Rhode Island where I live, and it's an amazing time to watch. I mean, we talk about proof of concept, Thomas. I mean, you and I are both surrounded by statist authoritarian regimes,
Oh yeah.
and watching them crumble while at the same time trying to cast their last lines using, ironically, libertarian content to survive let me ask you this: is in being in New York and being as active and as aware, and what does it make you, libertarian woke? the Do you feel like you're in your own political driver's ed film and you're in the passenger seat and all you can do is watch? At times, how's Mr. Cuomo doing?
Oh, geez. Hopefully not very good. Uh, our governor is extremely out of touch, and we do see some libertarian concepts come around from him when he wants to cover up his own mistakes. I mean, we all see politicians do this. They do one thing, and then they say, "Oh, well, now we have to do this and to fix it," and that's usually at least slightly more libertarian.
Let's talk about your campaign. You had some great volunteers, some great campaign management. Give us a picture of what went well, what you learned, what your takeaway with it. We hope that whether it be in a campaign or in some other public status, you'll continue to represent the Libertarian Party as nobly as you did. But what was your biggest takeaways from your efforts in 2020?
Okay, well, I have to start by blaming everything on Rich Pertel. He's a Libertarian out of Tioga County, and he is the Legislative Affairs Committee Chair now for the LPNY. And he's the one who put me up to running. He, myself, and a couple other Libertarians spent probably 4 months trying to find somebody to take this race. And finally, at the last minute, we didn't have anybody, and I'd been so involved with it. I said, you know what? Somebody has to do it, or this guy's going to go completely unopposed. There was no other contender in the race. And as Libertarians, we really believe that every incumbent deserves nothing short of competition. And I find it very unfortunate to see any incumbent or non-incumbent even go completely unopposed. That's just wrong. That doesn't give the people a choice. That doesn't give anybody options. That doesn't allow for a discussion of policies or a discussion of the direction in which we want our district or state to go in. And I said, to heck with it. I've got nothing to lose because New York's taking everything away from me anyhow. I might as well run. The interesting part about that is that, I am disabled and I do live on disability welfare. Hey, John, that's my neighbor. And my social workers who help me manage and get the services I need, which is increasingly harder every year in New York, by the way. But they were terrified. They're like, you're going to lose everything. You're going to lose your health care. You're going to lose your income. You're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to do that. But they actually worked hard to make sure that I didn't. So I kept my health care. I still get the treatment that I need. And I was able to run a campaign, raise funds, do all this without putting myself in the kind of detriment that they really thought I was going to be in at first. And one of the things that I've noticed through this is social workers and healthcare workers are very, very ripe for the picking if you're trying to make new libertarians. I can tell you that most of my nurses have either become libertarian or are perfectly willing to vote libertarian now. Most of my social workers have either become or are perfectly willing to vote libertarian now. And part of that's because they are at the heart of the waste of the welfare systems and the healthcare systems. They see that, they're forced to do the work of wasting taxpayer money. We think that welfare is just a check that people get, and it's not. It's so much more. I've been over this before. I have to prove that I'm still disabled despite having been born with a genetic condition, and I have to do that quite a few times in a year, and that costs the state and the taxpayer money. And I think there are a lot of ways around that. But when you were talking to the people who got into social work, say, let's pick that one, to do good. You're talking to people who got into an industry, and it is an industry. It's a state-run industry, but it's an industry, to help people. They want to help people. Social work is not a high-paid position, right?
Mm-hmm.
People don't get into it for the money. They get into it because they care. And what you find is that these people are immediately disappointed with their job. They're actually not allowed to help people. They do an awful lot more to, well, Larry Sharp, he calls it box checking, right? The state says, we did this, we did this, we did this, look what I can do, just like, what's his name from Saturday Night Live. And the end results really aren't tallied appropriately. They say they served all of these consumers, particularly with regard to those with disabilities, and they pat themselves on the back. But serving consumers doesn't actually tell you the end result. Doesn't tell you, did this person end up in a better spot? Did they end up with more happiness? Are they suffering less? All it says is that somebody showed up and got paid to check some boxes. It doesn't say what was actually accomplished. So that was very interesting to find that as I was running my race and everybody around me involved in social work and healthcare wanted to hear no, they were very, very easy to convince. The other interesting factors was travel, right? I don't drive for obvious reasons. So my campaign manager, Tucker Coburn, who should get an awful lot of credit for the well-organized portion of my campaign, he did a lot of the driving. And we were able to get out to almost every small community. We were able to outraise the last two Democrats that ran in this district. And we were able to get seen and heard an awful lot. To that note, I did not enter into candidacy thinking I could just go in and win. Right? You can't do that. That's not how it works. And I didn't have the organization that you need before you start. Right? Let's be honest. I was dove in. I'm that kind of guy. I will dive into anything new that I want to pursue and just make my way through. And enter COVID, right? Everything shut down. That made it more difficult. But, much like anything in life, the key is always to persevere and to not give up. You have to withhold your emotions. You have to calm yourself, and you have to deal with the problems that come as they come and move on. One thing that I want to say is the most frustrating part about running a libertarian campaign in a blue state is always having to turn around and say, no, libertarians don't want the disabled to die. And people believe that because we're against welfare. Right? I'm against welfare, even though I live on it. I'm against it. And that's because the nature of welfare. It extracts too many resources from our communities and doesn't give enough back to those communities through, say, people like me or whatever means, my roads. Same concept, they take too much and they don't give enough back. And if we leave it in those communities will do for themselves much better. And to that note, my entire life is riddled with instances of my community doing for me what welfare would not. And then you think about this more and more. When you're on my side of it, right, you are a welfare recipient specifically for disabilities, you see all of the money that gets wasted just to ensure that you're still disabled. And all of the mistakes that get made. I think I'm famous for being known that New York State lost my legs. There's that the system for assessing a disability can get so complicated that mistakes are so easy to make. And unfortunately, for some people, those mistakes are dire. They can lead to harm and death if those mistakes are made. In my case, the mistake's just kind of funny. It's a joke. But I'm a disabilities advocate and have been for some time. And I have a very clear understanding that there are other situations in which a mistake that's even less than what was made on mine could lead to harm for someone. And so, again, that's state imposed. I don't know. I'm sorry I get on get on
No,
that
no, not at
diatribe
all.
a lot.
No, you raise an important point. So often have we been described as heartless, as not having empathy, as not certainly not having sympathy, because we as an organization don't automatically endorse the notion of just of handouts per se, and it has nothing to do with the fact that we don't want to find ways to help individuals who are facing in very often dire challenges.
Yep.
What if I could sum it up, and I love your reaction to my thoughts. If I could sum it up, it's number one, the libertarians that I know, and I've met so many through the show, through activism, through traveling around the Northeast, are by far and away the most empathetic people that I've ever met, the most sympathetic people that I've ever met, the most caring, the most generous. They do so with their time. They resent the notion that we should take $10,000 away, if you will, by force from people and give $5,000 back and expect some type of lifelong affinity or affiliation or gratitude because of that forced redistribution. We see so many, to your very valid point, so many folks who work in or have spent a great deal of time in, if you will, the social welfare industry in the United States have seen the waste of government. We're seeing it right now, quite frankly, with the lunacy of the vaccine distribution system, and that's why we also draw so many people from our armed forces, veterans who have seen the lunacy of our waste of resources, of our misdirected or often undirected or often selfishly directed attempts at foreign interventions, at what we call "quote unquote" nation building. We've seen all that. We've seen the failure. We've seen the human cost, and yet we see very little in the way of improving people's lives. And what we just are saying is we want to take back control away from an artificially inflated government bureaucracy that's often uncaring and unseeing, and give it back to the people, those people who are talented and have the powers and the skills, as we say on this show, the skills to pay the bills, but the skills also to find ways to efficiently distribute that support, and at the same time leaving people empowered to raise themselves up economically and giving them the tools and, most importantly, the opportunities to do that.
Yeah,
that's what I see.
You're absolutely right. And actually, my neighbor piped up. I saw his comment. John, again, we do make it excessively difficult for people to get off of welfare, specifically disability welfare is what I'm familiar with. There's a cap on the income I can get before I lose other things in life I need, like my health care. And the gap between welfare and what you need to make to cover all the stuff you lose when you're on welfare or taken off of welfare is immense, right? The state has manufactured a price of $19,000 for a power wheelchair, and also the quality has gone down in my lifetime. That's why mine is crowdfunded by the Libertarian Party, by the way. It's 10 times better and costs 1/3 the price.
Oh my God.
Yep, and it came from Austin, Texas, by the way. I was hoping to go back there this year, but we saw what happened with that. So I did make it to Orlando anyhow. So libertarians are all about solutions, right? And sometimes it involves compromise, right? So 3-4 years ago, when I first got interested in the Libertarian Party, I was in a very bad position in life. I was in a broke-down wheelchair, couldn't do much. My mental state was negatively affected by that, right? Whose wouldn't be? And as I got interested in the libertarian politics, I was one of the burn it all down libertarians, right? Just get rid of it. Let's see what happens. Roll the dice. I was at that point. However, as I got more involved with the Libertarian Party, they provided me with what I needed at a much lower cost when my government wouldn't. I mean, that's amazing, right? That's a new lease on life for me. The wheelchair I'm sitting in added 8 to 12 years to my life minimum. And I know what that means. I have that appreciation. And I was instilled with a sense of obligation just from my upbringing, right? But when somebody does something like that for you, you don't just take it for granted, right? You do something, you give back, you find a way. And so when I I was asked to form the Shenango County ICO last year, well, not last year, over a year ago, 2018. We formed October 11th. I had just gotten the chair and just got it modified so that I could use it appropriately and very comfortably. It is actually, and I want to point this out, crowdfunded by Libertarians. It is single-handedly the best wheelchair I have ever had in my life. I don't want to go into the details of why, because there are many, but I sit on a mission, let's get this county organization formed. It took me 8 weeks. 8 weeks to form a county organization. We had very few Libertarians in the county, but I managed to do it. Some people wanted to be Libertarians, but didn't because of the ballot access, and we did just gotten ballot access, and now somebody's trying to start the county organization, so some of them showed up for that. And some of them were friends who I'd been talking to, and the minute I was forming the county organization, they changed the registration and jumped on board. And then 3-4 months later, COVID hits, and everything kind of puts us to a standstill because we are a rural county. It's already hard enough to travel just in the winter for most of us, and you throw the COVID into the mix, and nobody wants to donate because nobody wants to. We're all scrambling for toilet paper at that point. So the county organization kind of come to a halt, but we kept our executive committee together. We kept our meetings going, and we stayed on top of it. And that's another reason why I launched my campaign, was to grow the message, to grow the party. And a friend of mine, Paul Seacrest, who runs a lot of numbers for the LPNY, told me last November that Libertarian registration grew by 40% through my campaign in my district, which is 4 counties. And in Shenango County, I was just looking at the numbers today, new numbers. We're up another 60%. So in the less than year and a half that I've been involved, technically, we've grown in Shenango County by somewhere around 70 or 80%. And my campaign was able to grow it in other counties as well. And I think that's important. And in New York, we have this left versus right vitriol still going on, right? We see this in libertarian circles a lot because we track people from both sides, and we're all still kind of like holding on to our fears and our hate. And, I was never registered for one of those other 2 parties, so I'm a Libertarian. Always been a Libertarian, never been anything but a Libertarian, and I have shed my fear. When you're someone in a position like mine, and you're able to put something like a state senate campaign together, and go out and visit all the communities like I did, and rally a team, and raise the money, and get seen, and even stump your opponent on a few occasions, which I'm pretty proud of, by the way. People take note, right? I mean, this is somebody who's coming from nowhere with nothing and doing something. And I've always believed in the concept of leading by example. And leading by example means that you put yourself aside and you do what's necessary. And follow your beliefs, follow your passions, follow your principles, right? I'm very big on principles in life. And just doing that, I think, we can all do that for one, but that alone does a lot to improve the optics of our party and to improve the message. I mean, we are not billionaires. I mean, I don't know about you, Pat. You got $1 billion in your back pocket.
Nope.
Nobody's looking to bribe us for political favors, right? I've never been offered a political bribe. Mm-hmm. And we're usually putting ourselves out to do this. Mm-hmm. And people understand that. But one thing that I was able to do, which I think it's important in New York because we are such a blue state, is I was able to make inroads with some Democrats. I mean, if you can get Democrats in New York to listen to the libertarian message, you're doing something right. I had one wanted to attack me on health care and welfare. Like I said earlier, people tend to think we just want all the disabled and poor people to die. That's not true. And now that person is inviting me to events, even now that the campaign's over. Right? We're friends on Facebook. They like what I say about disabilities because they too used to be a social worker and have a disability, and they're listening to the libertarian message, and they're starting to get it. And that's amazing.
It's an absolute that there is no better way to grow the party than running for office. You're given a pulpit, if you will. You're given the attention, as brief as it might be sometimes during troubled times like now, but you're elevated above the usual noise, if you will, because you're running for office. And there is, whether it be the concerns of the opposition about an insurgent campaign like yours was, whether it be about the fear of many to openly discuss the failures of government, both on an ongoing basis for issues surrounding, caring for folks who are facing physical challenges, or any one of a number of national issues, whether it be simply fear of the unknown. Being able to voice a libertarian philosophy and taking advantage of that bully pulpit that you're given is just the impact is immeasurable. Now we've only got a couple minutes left, so if you can give us a couple minutes of what your future plans are. I don't know if you formulated them, or what your thoughts are, and of course how folks can stay in touch with you, where they can reach out to you on social media, help fund your. Because campaigns are ongoing; they never end, and we can complain about that as libertarians and be frustrated by that, or we can accept it as a current reality and utilize those platforms. So give us a, if you will, kind of a snapshot of what Thomas Quiter's immediate plans are politically, and what your thoughts are.
Well, right now, I am feverishly working with help of an assistant to make sure that the county organization has its convention and adopts new bylaws by March 1st. So if you're in Chenango County, you're a Libertarian, or you can change your registration to Libertarian by February 14th, then give me a shout. I'm on Facebook, Thomas Daniel Quiter. You can find Thomas Daniel Quiter, Libertarian as my political page. I ran on the slogans that I wasn't going to quit. Never quitter, rarely quieter. Quiter won't quit on you. So you can only assume what my future in politics will be from that. I am not announcing yet, but I do intend to within the next 12 months. And you can continue to donate to my future campaign at tomfor52.com, TOMFOR52.com. The antidote is still working. Use the donate link. The merchandise is still available. And, I want to, because I am a disabilities advocate and I am a cannabis advocate, I want to give a shout out to a new organization that is forming, NUG of Knowledge, NUGGOF knowledge.com. They are looking to connect cannabis users with cannabis suppliers with legal THC level smokable hemp. You can find their website there. They have some nice merchandise. But here's the thing. Every time you make a purchase, you're going to support both activism for pro-cannabis movements and a compassionate care program. Nugs and hugs. Every time you make a purchase, you're going to support giving CBD hemp to people in need. And that's important to me because as a disability advocate, I see all kinds of people with all kinds of disabilities doing what our current medical system cannot with cannabis. I saw them doing it when it was illegal 20 years ago, and I still see them doing it. And we need to increase that access. You see, in New York, medical marijuana, particularly regarding THC, is highly regulated. The shops that can sell THC marijuana are few and far between. For me, if I had my medical card, I would have to travel an hour. Travel is difficult and expensive for me. And the products themselves are regulated up in price. what we really need to do, in my opinion, is look at a model like what the state of Maine has. If you're a patient, you could grow your own. That's what we need here in New York, because so many of the people in the rural areas who have less access to health care or have more difficulty getting access to health care, let alone to a medical marijuana shop, are perfectly capable, or their families are perfectly capable of growing their own. And they should be able to. It's a plant, let's face it. So you can go to nugsofknowledge.com and buy your smokable CBD happen. And if you use the code TOM52, TOMFOR52, you will also improve my fundraising ability for the next campaign. And get a discount, by the way. I'm working closely with the company to make sure that it keeps its compassionate approach.
Absolutely. And by the way, offline, make sure you send me that link, because that we will, with your information in it, so that we can share that around, the libertarian universe. That's outstanding. One more time, your Facebook page.
Thomas Daniel Quiter, Libertarian. Look it up. It's not extremely active right now, but I am working on finding a new social media manager. The campaign ends, everybody wants a break, and they get going on their own things. I do have another initiative coming up. We are in the middle of filing the paperwork. I believe the certificate of organization is the next thing. New Yorkers for Economic Transparency, C103. Yep.
Amen.
501c3. Sorry, I always say that wrong. And we are going to focus mainly on subsidized and community-based projects that are detrimental to their communities as a whole, but often sold as something that's good. What really brought me into this was in Endicott, which is down in Broome County. They wanted to put in a lithium battery, and they were calling it a recycler, but what it really was an incinerator, and it was going to pollute the entire district and beyond, really. But they were trying to sell it as this green recycling plant, when really they were going to burn a bunch of chemicals and put it up in the atmosphere. And in the heart of a village, right? If you looked at the location on Google Maps, there were kids' ball fields and grocery stores right across the street. I mean, that's not recycling.
No. And, make a mental note of that. We'll talk about that offline, because there's certainly a show to be done, if you will, on environmental projects that are greenmailing and essentially blinding people like that, or the libertarian philosophy on property rights versus imminent harm to a community like that. There's a debate and a conversation to be had. Well, listen, Thomas, first of all, thank you for joining us tonight. I know you've had a full and rewarding day. Your efforts are a testament, not just because you're that libertarian, not just because of the challenges you face. It's the fact that you are so public facing that you take it to the streets in the middle of a pandemic, ignoring the challenges that you face and focusing almost obsessively. And that's the best word one of my favorite words, of hashtag taking it personally and bringing the message outside of our Amen choir, outside of the bubble, to folks who had never encountered a libertarian movement in New York State. We've got a wonderful party up there that's working their off, but at the same time, you're going into territory that's, again, just completely foreign, a complete lack of perspective about what we do, how we do it, why we believe in it, and what our goals are.
And it's swimming with sharks.
I can only imagine. So thank you for joining us tonight, and we're going to have you routinely stay in touch with us through all our programming efforts, so that we can do whatever possible to support not only your efforts but the libertarian movement at large in the Empire State. So thanks again, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you again for having me.
I just want to take a quick moment. John, our super producer, the man behind the big board, I'm going to ask him to bring up a GoFundMe. And this is typically outside of, if you will, of the span of this show. But we were all saddened to see and hear about the passing of Joshua Flynn. I found out actually literally a couple weeks ago, right as we got off the air. We'd actually had folks, Steve and John, spend an hour with us on this show talking about Illinois. And quite frankly, we featured Joshua Flynn. You can imagine my shock. I believe the folks from Illinois had found about it during mid-show. As we immediately got off the air and found that a family man, a libertarian, a friend of the party, someone who'd worked so hard for the movement and the philosophy in the city of Chicago in this past election cycle. We got to know him a handful of times from his appearances on the show. I got the opportunity several times to speak to him off air. I will be ever saddened by the fact my life will be less because of this damn pandemic that I did not have the opportunity to meet him in person. But I just want to broadcast, there is a Joshua Flynn Memorial that's going on. It is a GoFundMe. If I can read the words of Spike Cohen. For over a decade, Joshua Flynn has been an organizer, activist, mentor, and champion for the underserved. Last year, he ran for state representative for Illinois District 78. His campaign was so positive and forward-thinking that he was even endorsed by the Chicago Tribune. Josh led by example and made impactful changes for many in his community. Josh leaves behind his loving family, his wife Ramona, and his children, as well as countless friends and libertarian activists, by the way, amongst whom I count myself, who will greatly miss him. Rest in peace, Josh. Thank you for everything you've done. There's just a little bit to go for the goal of this, to meet the goal for this GoFundMe. I can't think of a family that deserves it more. One of the times I had the opportunity to talk to Joshua Flynn was when he was literally in the middle of a snowstorm outside of a public event. He caught me on the phone. He was going to come on that night, but he couldn't because an opportunity to speak in front of his native Chicagoans had come up. Certainly that was the priority. We talked for a few minutes about what he was going to present. And then sadly, I said goodnight. And I wasn't there to see him in action. Please take a moment. These are challenging times. We as the Libertarian Party and its various offshoots routinely ask for people's money just to promote activism, ballot access, to help support the legal challenges that we face. This transcends all of that. This is to help support as an expression of love, if you will, to help a man who in his last years worked tirelessly on behalf of a philosophy and a movement. I would ask you to take a moment and contribute, if anything at all possible, even a few dollars. We suffer greatly from the losses of the Joshua Flynns. There are many Joshua Flynns in this movement. I've had the opportunity to meet several of them. Let's support his memory because it should be so inspirational to many of us. Thank you for that. Second part of the show, I would like to welcome a Libertarian mayor. John, if you could bring up Cassaundra. John Gapso, by the way, serves behind the big board here at this show. He's the one who presents different images and responds tirelessly to my last minute ideas. And I, as a volunteer who's someone who's already become an integral part of the show in the few months that he's been with us, I want to also take a moment to thank him for his time and his efforts. Sandra Fryman, Plymouth, Ohio. Madam Mayor, how are you tonight?
I'm very well, thank you.
One of the things we do, you're a first timer here on the show. And so we always try and put people on the spot because that's what we do. In the recurring question we ask every single individual who joins us is, what was that libertarian moment in your life? When did that, proverbial, like in the cartoons, when did that light bulb go on? When did you know that you weren't going to take the easy route? Because certainly I think there are moments when, all of us look at the big budgets and the big time profiles and all the cavorting that the big tube and say, boy, wouldn't it be simpler if I took the easy way, if I didn't decide to pursue the road less traveled? So what was your libertarian moment, Mayor?
I would say the first time I really seriously started considering an outside option was after the Patriot Act was passed. I was pretty young then. I was still in high school, but even at that point, I realized that government could so easily overstep their boundaries and infringe on our privacy. And that was when I really started evaluating what my government's proper role was in my life. And it was very gradual up through the debate, I believe in '08, when Ron Paul was on the stage of the Republican candidacy. And the rest of the party just essentially shut him out on that debate. But everything he was saying resonated with me in a way that nobody else on that stage could. The way he talked about government spending, the way he talked about military intervention in foreign countries, those issues were something that I hadn't thought much about, but the way he talked about it really like revved me up in a way that I hadn't been before. And just watching the way he got buried on that stage and afterwards, it didn't sit right with me. So after that point, I realized that I really didn't have a home in either of the two parties. And then Gary Johnson ran, and in 2016 was when I first became actually involved in the political process. I became the chair of the Huron County Libertarian Party branch, and have been slowly building activities and meetings here since then. And then finally, I just kind of went full kilter and ran for office and won. And so it's just kind of been a nonstop progression.
Do you think that at any point, and certainly after this week, I'm going to assume no, but do you think at any point the Republican Party has ever been cognizant of, just on a human level, the losses that they suffered as a result of their treatment of Ron Paul?
I would like to think so, but at the same time, I've watched their trend of digging in their heels and becoming more and more extremist. So I don't know if they ever will fully realize that and swing back around. I don't know. It's their loss. So I don't know. I guess I don't lose much sleep over the people they throw away, because I'm one of them, and I'm glad to pick up the others that come our way.
You echo the importance of why we need to be that open tent, that friendly tent that people can come to. I guess I'll leave it this issue at this point. When Willard Mitt Romney represents, if you will, a voice of tolerance in the Republican Party, wow, that's a statement unto itself. It truly is. So you walk the walk. You not only helped organize an affiliate, you decided to run for office. Tell us about that process. What was it? An opportunity that you saw, an opening? Was it just a desire to move the ball forward for the party and compete on a municipal level? What was sort of the ingredients into you running for mayor? And tell us a little bit about the campaign and what it took. What was the numbers it took to win, and how you ran the campaign?
Sure. So it's a culmination of a lot of different things at the local level that led me into this decision. First and foremost, I became really active with a nonprofit group, the Plymouth Improvement Committee. I started by going to a meeting where they were essentially talking about disbanding because there wasn't any new vision for where they wanted to go. So I came in, and a couple of other friends joined me, and we've really taken it from what started as a fundraiser to help keep our pool open and get fireworks for our bicentennial celebration, to essentially privately funding the operations of our swimming pool. We also do a scholarship every year for a high school graduate who wants to focus on a community invested career. We do different public works. We've done improvements on our softball and baseball fields. We've done like STEM kits for our school. We also host a Christmas in the Village event where local artisans and craft makers and stuff can sell stuff. But then we also have a bunch of free activities for people to come and do, like ice skating, reindeer, all kinds of stuff like that. So what we do is we try to enrich the community in a way that helps everybody and something that everyone can take a part of. Something else we did this year that I'm really proud of is we restored our Veterans Park, and it was entirely privately funded. It had become pretty dilapidated. So we had to raise money to redo brickwork. We did a mural on the wall beside it, and it looks fantastic now. But something that I'm so passionate about it is everything we do is privately funded. The things that improve our community that we incorporate are all things that are done by volunteers. And that's so important to me. And doing all of that work led me to realize that we needed better communication with our public officials. And as I started going to council meetings and, kind of watched the way the sausage was made, I saw an opening with our mayor not wanting to run again. So there was an open seat unopposed. So I saw the opportunity and I took it. So it is a nonpartisan race. So I am not technically a libertarian mayor per se. It's not on my ballot, but I bleed gold, I'd like to think. But yeah, it basically was just this gradual culmination of wanting to be involved in my community and improve it in the best way that I could. And then eventually I saw an opening, so I took it. And it's basically, I believe that the best way to bring libertarianism to our communities is to live and breathe it. And I also want my kids to see that I'm involved in the community. I think instilling civic duty in our children is really important too. I want to normalize the fact that you can have a job, you can have kids, but you can also participate actively in your local government. You can be a volunteer and do, good works in your community as well. So it's really about living and breathing the philosophy of voluntarism and libertarianism in action, and showing that it is more effective than government oversight and regulation. So that's kind of where it all comes from. It's just a jumbled up kind of pile of stuff that worked out the way it did.
Well, you say that, but I'm going to point out a consistency between some of the candidates. And when I bring up individual candidates, I'm sure that I missed several because there are so many great candidates. Folks always wonder when we're going to develop that bench. We're well beyond that path. The primary purpose of the show, if you will, is to bring an understanding of what's happening around the country with elected libertarians now and libertarian candidates. And if there's a consistency there in terms of the mechanics of running for office, the term mechanic sounds, I don't know, too stilted, but so many successful candidates now, yourself, Tricia Butler, Felicia Morrow, all started to some degree with community-based, privately funded organizations that advocated on behalf of perhaps the small business community in their town, perhaps a particular business district in their town, perhaps in a series of events and the boards of those events that were overwhelmingly privately funded and brought to their communities, as you have done, and they have begun to, and done so in the run-up to their candidacies, successful, if you will, stewardship, not governing, stewardship of events and places and people and business communities and business climates in a manner unlike anything seen in quote unquote governance. There I go again, governance today. Because the primary purpose, your initial motivation that has carried you to where you are in the political life and our other successful candidates stems from a simple desire to improve the life, the lot, the appearance, the nature, the activities of your community. And I am convinced people sense that despite being overwhelmed by authoritarian governments at every level, by government shakedowns at every level, that when someone appears before them, it doesn't matter that they're wearing gold. They just scream public service in a manner that we haven't seen really in generations. Public service is supposed to be, and someone else came up with this line, supposed to be for people who want to help lives, not get one. And I don't know if I've ever heard a better way of summing that up. Isn't that really the ideal here that's at work?
Yes, and local government is so different from running for a state or federal level office. It's not glamorous down here. You're doing a lot of the work that you see. You don't see a lot of what we do. It's a lot behind the curtains. It's routine maintenance. It's, garbage contracts or sewer lines or infrastructure or trying to figure out how to get a grant to pay for the roads that are crumbling in front of your utility office. It's just kind of, what do I want to say? It's more centralized and focused, but I feel like local level has so much more of an impact on the lives of the people that are
Right.
around you. It's a much more important position because what you're doing impacts the people that you love far more than what the people on the hill are doing.
Right.
I have a really good opportunity to make the lives of the people around me better, and I want to fully capitalize on that opportunity. And it can be something simple like getting a vac truck so that we can pump our storm drains adequately so that basements don't flood on the main street. Or the solar power plant that we put into operation in March is going to reduce electrical bills by 10% next year. It's really exciting things like that that we get to do that can impact our environment, our community, their utility bills, help them, reduce carbon footprint as well as their payment. And it's just the most effective way that I can make a difference. So that's really what it's about, is just trying to better the lives of yourself and everyone around you, and also limiting the amount of government that it takes to do those things. When you live in a community, you have to basically give and take in regards to government. So yes, I'm a libertarian, but I'm a libertarian that lives in a village. So I'm basically consenting to ordinances and regulations by living here. In exchange for that, I get services like sewer, water, and different luxuries that maybe rural people who live out in the country don't have. So it's freedom, but it's also government, and it's a give and take. So you kind of have to figure out that balance and what works. But I try to do it from a libertarian leaning position, but also a pragmatic one, so that it's helpful to the most people.
Volunteerism, until very recently, it appeared to be a dying form of life. And I'll briefly give you my thoughts on it. And you're someone who's, living the life, walking the walk. So many folks when I grew up, and I'm older than most of our listeners, so many folks were used to parents volunteering to run the Little League, parents being involved, community members being involved in Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, church activities, village cleanups, and any one of a number of items. As government grew more pervasive and, quite frankly, more expensive, as a society, we now have people and individuals, and I'm convinced a significant reason for this is the government, because of their hideous in the middle of a pandemic that's been exacerbated because of government involvement and ultimately government failure, and creating a vacuum of leadership from the communities that are most impacted to adapt to this terrible disease. All of this has created an environment where it's very difficult for people on a very practical level to volunteer like they used to. They're working, they're exhausted. They're trying to. Right. How do we, and how do you as just the sheer cost of education, for example, if you're planning to send your children on to some type of secondary education, technical or university, from your perspective, your very learned perspective, how do we bring back that spirit of volunteerism while simultaneously cutting government, which will then cut expenses, which will then allow people to become more volunteers? How do we do that?
Well, it's baby steps from what I've seen. Basically, when I try to get people to come and join us, we want to have fun while we're doing it. I've made such good friendships doing volunteering and helping members of the community. It brings people together. It fills your soul with something that you wouldn't get anywhere else when you know that what you're doing is making where you live a better place. And it's hard to explain that to somebody unless they actually get in there and do it with you. But we do have a lot of fun while we're doing it. And I think that's the key to it. Like, we all have kids. We bring our kids. You're never not allowed to have your kids there. We encourage it. We welcome it. Our kids play together. We try to make it as inclusive as possible. And we do things, all around the clock. So it works with anybody's schedule. So like during the morning, we'll say, hey, can we get a couple of people to do this? In the afternoon, it's like, hey, if you're not working, we could use some people to do this over here. And it's just delegating tasks and leaning on each other as that network of support. We also do things for each other, when our personal life comes into play as well. Like we've done fundraisers for each other, or if one of us has had a baby, like, we got a massage package for her, because we really care about each other, and we're a network for each other to lean on as well as the community. And that's so important in making it work, because you don't realize, how isolated you can sometimes be when you're wrapped up in your own family, in your own bubble with your job and your kids. And sometimes you feel like that's all you have time for. And we have to figure out a way to make everything fit together. And sometimes that's impossible. So you have to have that support network. And that's something that a lot of people don't really want to talk about. But I think if we could make our culture more family oriented, more inclusive, and more welcoming and accommodating to different people's needs, it would go such a long way towards getting people to have more free time and be more willing to step out of their bubble to do things like that. Because it can be intimidating to go into a group of people you don't know, that you've never met, with only this little inkling that you want to do something more for your community or something more for the betterment of your kids' lives. And taking that first step is crucial. And I think once you figure out how to make it a place that people want to be, you're already ahead of the game, because volunteering should be something that you want to do, and not just because it's, making it a better place, but because it's fun. And don't get me wrong, I mean, we take out trash after our events, or there's stuff that's not glamorous, cleaning toilets after an event, but you do it and you can laugh about it, and then we get drinks afterwards. And basically anytime we can incorporate alcohol into an event, we do, just because we want to drink it. It helps. But we have a really good time while we're doing it.
And we've only got a few minutes left, but we're going to run a little over, and I want to have you back in a few weeks, because there's so much more I want to talk about. I would love on one show to create a panel of elected libertarians, and to talk about some of the real, nitty gritty issues, like what are you doing with your school systems? How are you handling some of these involuntary impositions on individuals, like expansions of sewers? Again, the nitty gritty, the nuts and bolts, the least glamorous. But you couldn't possibly visit this show without at least some type of discussion of two initiatives that you've done, which sort of rock the libertarian world. What's up with you and tickets? Tell us the story, please.
Oh,
you got something against tickets, lady? Come on, tell us.
Well, I don't like them, for one. Lord knows I've gotten my share of them. So I wanted to get rid of mayor's court when I first became mayor. It was something that my police chief essentially talked me out of, and it was at length, but he came from a position of, I could do more for the people in town than if they had been sent to our municipal courts that are not impacted by our community. So basically it's with the understanding that I am a bleeding heart, compassionate person, and always err on the side of leniency. So I have dismissed a handful of tickets, because in the end, I felt that the impact that it had on the person that had been given them was far more detrimental than if it had not been. So no, I don't dismiss every ticket that comes through my court by far, but there are circumstances where I feel that if it's truly going to impact them in such a way as to cripple their ability to get to work, or if they don't even have the money to pay it to begin with, sometimes I will dismiss it outright, especially if what they've done has not impacted anyone else in a negative way, victimless crime. But again, that is something that I don't do often, but it has happened. It did definitely get blown up quite a bit when it was tweeted by a friend of mine. But we go from there. Mayor's court is something that my cops are in an understanding with me that I am a compassionate person, and that is kind of the side that I tend to rule on. So we go with that.
Well, it's just, if I can mention briefly, America is a very expensive place to be poor. So many communities lord on, if you will, these penalties, these fees. Some of the worst, the term pipeline to prison can mean a lot of things. And some of it has to do with, some very serious crimes that have been quote unquote crimes that have been conflated into felonies or misdemeanors, which impact really the course of one's lives because of, well, smoking a plant, for example, or any one of a number of things, civil fines that can escalate into criminal ones, particularly when they involve the loss of a license or a professional license and forcing someone really in a position to have to break the law in order to literally survive. And what happens then, of course, you've got these compounding interest costs and compounding penalties. And, we take someone who, God forbid, didn't have the change for a meter or literally smoked a plant and literally can end up in prison because their license got suspended or something hideous like that.
Exactly.
This is a pretty simple yes or no answer, but is it in fact the role of government to use nonviolent crimes, and their word crimes, not mine, to use nonviolent actions to literally impoverish and or imprison someone? Is that ever appropriate for government?
No, and what I see is these people that come before me, and the most common thing by far is driving under suspension. They're in a pit that they can't dig themselves out of. You need your license so that you can drive to work, so that you can make money, but it's not enough money to pay these ridiculous fines that are levied against you for whatever mistake you had. And it's this thing that just keeps compiling and getting bigger and bigger. And these people are hopeless. They come into me, they know they were driving illegally, but they have to do what they have to do. Some of them were driving to work. Some of them were going to see their kids on the weekend for custody. And, I have a real issue with citing them some huge fine that they don't have the money to pay for to begin with. Mm-hmm. And digging the hole deeper for them. I do everything I can to not have that happen. Whether it's just assessing a minimal fine or, telling them get your payment arrangements or even just outright dismissing it. My goal is not to further impact them from returning to normalcy.
Right.
It's frustrating to me because I know that these people are not hurting anyone other than the fact that they need to dig themselves out of the hole, and it's overwhelming. And sometimes you don't even know where to start. And a lot of these people that come before me didn't even know that their license was suspended when they were driving. Right. If your SR22 lapses and it gets canceled, sometimes you're not even aware of it. So maybe a more jaded person would say they know perfectly well that what they're doing. But honestly, I truly believe that a lot of these people are oblivious to how quickly they can get themselves in trouble without even being aware. So my sympathies are typically with the person, and I'm willing to listen to, their story, their case, whatever they want to tell me, because I've seen it firsthand. I know what it's like, and I feel for them. And I know the system is not geared to work in their favor at all.
Right. And speaking of crimes that should not be crimes, speaking of using a plant for either medicinal or recreational purposes, what's up with you and recreational cannabis here? What transpired? Give us the story on that.
Sure. So one of the things that I only half joked about, but kind of ran on because some of the people that work for the village were friends of mine before I ran. I'd always tell them, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make marijuana legal in this place, and we're going to have pot everywhere. Just to rile them a little bit, but also because I am very passionate about bodily autonomy and treating yourself medicinally. And frankly, it's a plant that helps a lot of people, and I'm a huge fan of it. So I got with Chrissy Wickers because she knows people from Ohio Sensible, and she linked me up with people that are very passionate about decriminalizing marijuana in Ohio. They worked with me to get the draft of the ordinance that would need to pass. And I wrote it so that it would fit Plymouth, sent it to our solicitor, had him draw it up, and I presented it to my council to vote on. I also had, I did 3 readings of it in public so that people knew that it was on the table for voting. I wrote a speech and I read it before we voted on it. And it was a 3-3 vote with my council, 3 yeses, 3 nos, which means the mayor gets the tiebreaker vote, which made me so tickled. Oh, I couldn't have asked for a better vote to tie on. But people often say, oh, I bet the Republicans voted no on it. But actually, all 3 members of council that voted yes are Republicans, in fact. So that is something that I like to share with people. It's just a fun fact, but it was something that made me very happy. And it's probably my favorite thing that I've done so far.
That's outstanding. I'm going to make a move here. I believe that, quite frankly, if Reno doesn't work out or DC doesn't work out the next time around, I believe it's clear that the next place to hold an in-person convention for the Libertarian Party of America is, in fact, Plymouth, Ohio. You guys got a big park there? You got a big enough park?
We have a beautiful park.
So we can social distance, put up a couple tents.
Oh, yeah. We've got like 5 pavilions down there and picnic tables. We're good to go. There's grills down there. We'll cook out. It'll be fun.
And so we can literally light the fires of freedom.
There we go.
Plymouth, Ohio, without suffering any of the unnecessary consequences that seems to have been attached to, well, imbibing in some form a mood ameliorating substance that's grown naturally amongst the fields and hills of Plymouth, Ohio. God bless America and God bless you. That's not, but on a serious note, again, what you now have is a community where people can grow up, where they can understand, particularly the very young, the youths. They're going to grow up in a community which sees, a real diversity of political thought. They are not hidebound to the duopoly, if you will. They see freedom in action on a daily basis, where intelligent interpretations are made of public safety laws, where intelligent interpretations and personal responsibility is assigned to the use of a plant or the use of something in liquid form, or the use of, demon alcohol or anything, where adults, you used the word bodily autonomy, excuse me. That's exactly what we should be teaching to individuals. That's exactly what we should be teaching to young people, because ultimately this is the party, the political party, the philosophy that respects the rights of the ultimate minority, the individual. And that's what you're creating there, isn't it?
I would like to. That's the goal.
So in a very real sense, Plymouth, Ohio, and Burnsville, Minnesota, and a couple of small towns in Tennessee and in California are really, if you will, the petri dish for the rebirth of liberty on so many different levels. And this, to all the naysayers, and I love you all, but to all the naysayers, the whiners, the complainers who argue about, everything about the Libertarian Party, we in the last, as a movement, in the last handful of years, are literally changing hearts, changing minds, changing lives, and redefining what government means in people's lives. Congratulations. You're doing it. No, you're doing it, and you're an example. And it's a lot of responsibility, because I know that you are an example to so many people. You are you are. I'm not aware of a lot of libertarian mayors, and I'm not aware of a lot of folks who have the philosophical strength. It's a family show, to take those type of issues, not just advocate for them, not just talk about them, but actually execute them in such an impactful way. We've gone long tonight, and I think it was very valuable. I hope people find it valuable and informational. I do want to get a show where we've got folks who, maybe in a few months, when folks have had, some of the newer electees, if you will, have an opportunity to get their feet wet in a lot of municipal issues and compare and contrast. We didn't even get a chance to talk about your school systems. We didn't get a chance to we talked a little bit about commercial development. Those are the type of issues that we want to talk about in this show, and how leaders like you bring them to the forefront. How can folks find out more about you, support you? If you're raising money, donate to you, engage in what we lovingly call shameless self-promotion.
Well, I really don't have a public presence per se. I have a personal Facebook page. If anyone ever wants to reach out to me and pick my brain, I'm pretty happy to talk with just about anyone, especially people considering running for office. I'll give you any help or advice or input that I can. If you want to shoot me a message, I pretty much respond to just about everyone. I'm not raising money for myself or a campaign. It any time in the near future. Just my nonprofit Plymouth Improvement Committee. Sometimes we're raising money. So anytime I post on Facebook, like, hey, we're raising money, generally what we're doing is keeping events free in our community that people in surrounding communities also take advantage of. So that's where my passion is. That's where any fundraising that I do goes to, pretty much back into the community that I live in.
Excellent. Well, Mayor Fryman, congratulations on just being right out in front and again delivering our philosophy to a generation of Ohioans who, were it not for your effort and Chrissy's effort and the great Libertarian Party of Ohio, again, a wonderful affiliate who really works it. Young candidates like Oscar Herrera, countless. Yep. I know I've missed people, and I apologize for that. But again, the effort in Ohio is outstanding. You face exigent challenges from governors that are just essentially have no soul. And I congratulate your continued efforts and wish you nothing but the best. And I hope we get the chance to talk again very soon. Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. All right, folks, that wraps up this evening. I understand we ran a little bit long, but two outstanding advocates for the libertarian philosophy, living libertarian lives on a daily basis, being examples, if you will, to individuals we always say may never have even met a libertarian in their life. Imagine if one of the first libertarians in your life was Mayor Fryman. Imagine if one of the first libertarians in your life was Thomas Quiter. And you see the nobility and the work and the day-to-day challenges that they face and their willingness to give them themselves so freely to do so. It's an example really for all of us, present company included. So we'll close out this evening. We hope to see you next Friday night at 9:30. This is An Hour with the Candidates, aka Candidates Corner, a project, if you will, of the Libertarian National Committee. Joe Bishop Henchman is our chair. A big thanks, as always, to John Gabso. He runs the big board here, the man behind the scenes who gives you all these graphics and insights and donates his time freely for this show. He's passionate about the show. And we'll join you next Friday. Again, the point here, you've met tonight vanguards of the libertarian movement, elected officials, people who ran great campaigns. And for everyone who says we don't have a bench, how do we start that chain of libertarian candidates winning? It's already happening. I am convinced that amongst the people that we've had on our show in the last 7 or 8 months, or you've had an opportunity to meet, will be ultimately at some point in time our senatorial candidates, our presidential candidates, congressional candidates, gubernatorial candidates. And some of them will win and some of them will be successful. And others will define success as, again, bringing that message to a new platform, a new stage at a level heretofore unknown. The chapters have yet to be written, but we're seeing it happen in real time. So I ask people during these difficult times to take heart, to direct whatever efforts you can to raising all of us up, promote the movement, understand the philosophy, and live a libertarian life. Thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you next Friday.